Welcome to EWA's FIN-LYT podcast. EWA is a fee-only RIA based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We hope all listeners of this podcast will benefit as we deep dive into complex financial topics that we will make simplified for you. And we hope that this really serves as a catalyst so that you can make the best financial planning decisions for your family and also save time. Today's episode, we're talking about what to do if your financial advisor retires. And why this is a topic we're addressing is a lot of our recent clients have come to us because their current advisor, maybe of 10, 20, 30 years, is retiring. And a statistic that we researched is the average age, there's several studies out there, of a financial advisor today is between the ages of 56 to 58. So some studies say 56, some studies say 58. So the point being is that a lot of people, if you look at the wealth in America and the disparity in America, the majority of wealth is with people over the age of 65. So a lot of people in retirement use financial advisors. A lot of younger people are still up in the air of whether they're going to self-manage or use their parents' advisor or go find a more modern financial advisor. So today's episode, we want to talk about what to do if your financial advisor retires. Should you self-manage? Should you switch to a different advisor? And just tips and tactics on how to go about making that decision. So first of all, let's just start with what are some of the options that a potential client would have if they get the call that their financial advisor is retiring then?
Yeah, so a couple options. Number one, they can choose to just self-manage their investments. So whether it's at their existing custodian that they had previously been working with, or a different one. Likely there's going to be some sort of succession plan when your advisor retires, so you can choose to stay on at the current custodian, and maybe another advisor would help service your accounts and kind of take over that relationship. Or the third option, you could seek a new financial advisor, be it at the same custodian or a different one.
Yeah, so let's just say hypothetically, let's use Fidelity as an example. Like you have an advisor, maybe an RIA that custodian through Fidelity, maybe a Fidelity advisor through their more retail channel. So a common option would be just to leave your accounts as is. So your financial advisor retires. That financial advisor, if they're part of a firm, is probably introduce you to a successor, like a junior advisor that's going to take over. One option you have is you could call the custodian and say, hey, I don't want any professional management on this account. Please remove this firm off my account, and your accounts will stay where they're at. The account numbers will stay the same. The tax documents, the history will stay the same, and the fees will go away. Now, all the work would then be on you to then manage moving forward. But that is going to be an option at most custodians, such as Charles Schwab, such as Vanguard, such as Fidelity. Where that may not be an option is if you're with a traditional wirehouse. Let's just say a Merrill Lynch or Morgan Stanley. They have different tiers. I believe it's called Merrill Edge that you would go into if you don't want to work with a traditional advisor. And some of the holdings you in may be proprietary, so if you're thinking about switching from a traditional wirehouse, it would be good to have that conversation once you get notice that your advisor is retiring, so you have an understanding of what's possible to switch out versus not. Because that could be more difficult working with the 1-800 number than telling your advisor, hey, I'm going to move, get me ready to move, sell out of all the proprietary funds, etc. So Chris, what would let's say that someone doesn't want to self-manage. So we've talked through that's a definitive option. Someone could just call their custodian and say, I don't want to work with an advisor. So the advantage of that is the fees would go down. They'd still have the fees of the funds they're in to deal with. And then they obviously have all the time, decision-making, tax management, portfolio decisions that would fall on them. But let's say someone wants to move to a new advisor, and that's with a different custodian. Talk about the details and how important it is. What's kind of a checklist do you want to go through in making that transition from an overall planning, tax? What other considerations should we be thinking about?
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot that goes into it. I think the context of your planning is important too. So if you're in the accumulation phase versus if you're somebody that's in that category that you mentioned earlier, same age as your advisor that's retiring, maybe different considerations if you're getting ready to unwind the accounts. I think definitely from our vantage point, consolidating accounts, it's extremely helpful if we can get a concise summary of where everything's at. Statements, just getting all of your housekeeping in good order, making sure everything, you know exactly what you have first, and that you understand what accounts you have. From there, I think it's really, whether you work with a team like ours or another financial advisor, as long as that information's clean, they're going to be able to do their job and get everything swept over pretty smoothly. And
really, any RIA should be taking a lot of that work off your plate. So whether it's covering any transfer fees, submitting any transfer paperwork, all of that should be kind of done behind the scenes, outside of your area of work.
Yeah, absolutely. So that first year, it's very crucial. Let's say someone's transferring from Charles Schwab to Fidelity. They're going to have that year, let's say that's in 2024, they're going to have tax documents, especially if those are brokerage account dividends and capital gain distributions. They're going to have to go back to that old custodian, grab those tax documents, plus have the tax documents in the current year. So sometimes people say, I want to wait till the year. Well, then you're just kicking down usually if you're going to switch, it's smart to do it that year. So it's fresh of mind. That's your final, let's call it difficult tax year, because you're going to have tax documents coming from different places. And then the goal in our mind would be consolidate everything in one place. The benefits of that obviously would be fees, would be time savings, coordination with one team, being able to log in, and then also cybersecurity. A lot of times we see cybersecurity threats because it's hard to, when you have stuff kind of spread out everywhere, passwords that you're not, keeping, updating frequently or having dual authentication. That's where threats, but at first is if you have a reputable firm such as Schwab or Fidelity, where they have the highest level of cybersecurity, they have protection mechanisms where if you do get hacked, you're still protected. You can keep track of it in a much, much better manner. Okay, well, let's discuss then. So anything else that you guys can think of that's important from a transitional standpoint? I'm just thinking like a lot of affluent clients, potentially in their 60s, they probably have stuff in trust. They probably have, beneficiaries designated the right way. So we want to make sure that the new advisor has copies of the trust that you put together, the estate planning, so that those accounts can flow, the beneficiaries can flow. And usually we can take this as a good opportunity to audit all of that planning you've done and make sure that it's still your intention to have everything set up the way it is. Anything else that you guys can think of? Before we transition into how to decide, assuming you are going to continue to use a financial advisor, what are good interview questions? What are good considerations? What are good philosophical alignments that should be in place, etc.? But before we go down that path, anything else you guys can think of just from the transitional standpoint?
Yeah, I think we've been fortunate in a lot of the circumstances that, like you mentioned a little bit ago at the start, from the new families we've gotten to work with, that some of the previous advisors are involved in the process too, in the transition. But if that's not the case, I think it's important to be really intentional about the last meeting you're going to have with the advisor to really make sure that you understand what you have. So I think by nature, a lot of the people that we work with, at least, are a lot of people that have advisors, hire them because they're busy. So 9 times out of 10, whenever we're sitting down with people, they don't really know what they have. So I think unless your advisor is going to be involved with the next team, I think definitely use that last meeting to talk through just simply exactly what you have, to make it easier on yourself.
Absolutely. Perfect. Well, deciding what advisor to work with. So what are some, in your guys' minds, what are some reasons that you should work with a financial advisor versus not? What would be your top of the list? Top 3 reasons why you should work with a financial advisor.
Go for it.
It's a great question, Matt. I think the one thing you should be looking for in an advisor is someone that's going to help see your plan through your retirement throughout the rest of your life. You mentioned before, but financial advisors, average age, late 50s. Oftentimes, clients are very similar age to their financial advisor. So by the time that the advisor's retired, the client is either in retirement or approaching retirement. That's often when they need the most help, is when they start unwinding accounts and taking distributions. And oftentimes it can take, months, years, decades to build up that trust, understand the client's family dynamics, everything that goes into their financial plan. So when you're looking for a new advisor, want to make sure that you're seeing a team that's going to be able to see you through that retirement throughout the rest of your life, be it 20, 30, 40 years, or do you have a team that's in place that's going to be able to sustain that throughout that time frame? And then also I'd be looking for, again, fee-only fiduciary RIA that's always going to be acting in your best interest, that doesn't have any conflicts of interest with any fund company, insurance company. Want to make sure that the firm that you are with is aligned in that standpoint with your goals and everything like that.
Absolutely. I'll just go down a list of so I'd want to make sure if this was happening to me that there is investment philosophy alignment. So, the basic rules of investing, asset allocation, diversification, staying in long term are followed. I wouldn't want someone toting they can beat the market. If they beat the market, great. I want to make sure their main philosophies are asset allocation, diversification, and low cost investing through index funds or direct indexing. Obviously, I want them keeping up with the different indexes, benchmarks, large cap against S&P, mid cap against S&P 600 or S&P 400, small cap against S&P 600. I wouldn't want them touting performance. I'd want investment philosophical alignment of, hey, we're trying to get great returns, but also manage risk. And more importantly, I want them to make sure that, my balance sheet is basically supporting my life by design, and we're not just sitting on a pile trying to grow it and not having any tough conversations about, what do you want this money to do for you? So that would be the first thing. I think the second thing would be extremely transparent around fees, any kind of conflicts of interest. So how are you paid? I'm biased, but I'd be looking for an REA where it's a flat, percentage under management and all services are bundled in there. I want someone to handle as much as possible, taxes, investments, insurance, everything under one roof if possible. And I think the most important thing, honestly, would be just the really, tough conversations that most advisors kind of just sit on the assets and say, hope the clients don't spend anything, because then, the percentage, even though it goes down as the assets grow, it's still a bigger pile. But I want someone to challenge me and make sure that we're utilizing this while I'm living and involving my kids, hopefully future kids, plural, but involving them, because obviously kids are a huge part of someone's financial plan. So are you willing to work with my children, my family? Do you understand the dynamics of the family and how important that is? Are you willing to work with my estate plan? So I'd basically be looking for a comprehensive financial planner that can put as much as possible under one roof. I don't think there's a reason to delegate if my time's being wasted. I want someone saving my time where I'm not going to meet, 10 different professionals. That could almost be a full-time job in retirement. Like you meet your financial advisor a couple of times a year, then your CPA, and then your attorney, and then watch them disagree about everything. That just seems like we see that very commonly. I want something that's streamlined, quarterbacked, stress-free, and, saving time, not wasting time. So that brings us to a fee perspective. So, recently a client, had the option to stay in a low-cost outfit, and they were going to charge 0.3%, and our fee was double that. It was about 0.6%. Ultimately, the clients decided to work with us. But Chris, I know this was one with you. So what were the reasons why you think that client chose to work with us for double the fee versus the other outfit?
Yeah, I would say it's all the stuff you just kind of talked about. They're nearing the distribution years, so it's a different game versus accumulating. So we demonstrated the importance of how you're unwinding assets and which accounts you're pulling from. All of that has tax implications, so doing that efficiently is extremely important. Don't know how much detail we want to get into, but we discussed things like Roth conversion planning, gifting, lifetime gifting, trust planning. So it really showed that all of this, we're not just growing the money anymore. We have a system in place to distribute it, and not just distribute it, but from the legacy standpoint, really trying to tie everything up. So I think, again, we're biased, but we think the cost of working with an advisor is worth it. And they did too, so they're willing to.
That was an asset manager that was just managing investments versus our proposition for 0.6% was doing their full scope of financial planning, legacy planning for their kids, estate planning, doing their taxes, really understanding from a whole level versus that other outfit was just going to be, managing and trading their account. But there was going to be no other services involved with that. So obviously apples to oranges of what we're proposing, and it wasn't just a simple like, hey, use us, our portfolio is better. That was a 2-second part of the conversation. The in-depth part of the conversation was around everything else.
Yeah, you hit on a lot of things I was just going to add there, but I think the easy conversation would have been you guys get in the room and you talk about the portfolio and the returns and everything like that. But like you said, it's a whole different set of tools when you're in the distribution phase. So all the stuff you talked about, incorporating the kids, the legacy planning, the trust planning, like that is going to be incorporating more difficult conversations, but ultimately like that is your job as a financial advisor to be having those conversations and not just worry about growing the accounts.
So if you were to ask a potential new financial advisor 3 questions to gauge their wisdom, their philosophy, whether they're a good fit, I'm thinking of a good question, of several good questions. I want to discuss this. I would ask that advisor probably in the distribution stage, hey, if the market, crashes like 2008 next year, what's your plan for my family to make sure that we stay on track? What's the distribution plan? What changes are made? How do you navigate me through that? And just shut up. And I can tell you the answer should not be, let me plan this out, because a lot of times you need to gauge how that advisor is going to respond in stressful reactions. And if they have an understanding for your general balance sheet, a good advisor without any technology or calculator, they should be able to give you a pretty close to, accurate, high level answer philosophically and what exactly we would do.
Yeah. I was going to add, I would ask, what is your investment philosophy? And then just shut up. Because that is a concrete answer that I should be expected to receive. And that should almost be the same across all team members. Like if I'm talking to like a financial advisor and there's a portfolio manager that's in the room or in the other room, like he or she should have the same answer as the person that I'm talking to face to face. Like having a firm that's aligned on an investment philosophy, what's important to them. It's not just kind of willy-nilly, like here's your accounts. Like that's super important, and that's something that I would be looking for if I were looking for a new advisor, is having a firm that is kind of on the same page with all that stuff.
I'd be looking for someone that's not going to sell me, like not tell me exactly what I want to hear, but tell me the answer of what actually their belief is. I've been in a lot of meetings and I feel like sometimes advisors or more salespeople just try to give the right answer that client's looking for, but not the right answer of what your actual philosophy is and how you navigate them through the tough times. A lot of clients, if they already knew the right answer, then they wouldn't need you. So you always have to give the right answer, exactly how you do it. Chris, how about you? What question would you be asking if you were interviewing a new advisor?
As like a retiree, like somebody that's...
Yeah, let's do both. Or one as a retiree or accumulator.
Yeah, I would probably be... I think if I'm accumulating, I'm a little bit more... I don't want to say fee sensitive, but fee conscious. I want to make sure like the internal expenses I'm not overpaying, and then also the cost for the advice isn't too much. So I want to... guess this isn't more so a question, but more a concern. So I would ask just getting back to what Ben said, what's your investment philosophy for somebody in their, late 20s, early 30s? How can I what would you do in my shoes, simply? And then if I were distributing, I would just ask, how do we unwind this most efficiently, and just hear what they had to say. You guys took two good ones off the table.
We took the learning and fruit.
Yeah.
I think the fees are good. I would ask straight up, what are your fees? And make sure, obviously we're highly, in the behind the scenes know here, but make sure they disclose all types of fees. Like they should be disclosing what's your advisory fee, which is say at 1%. what's the internal cost of the portfolio if they're using all Vanguard funds or index funds? Maybe that's 0.2%. Maybe they're using mutual funds and that's another 1%. You got to make sure they disclose that. Are there any conflicts there? Are they getting action off of some of the trails of the mutual funds if they use mutual funds? And the third thing is, do they charge any transactional costs, or if the custodians charge those, do they cover those on your behalf? So there's 3 types of fees. You typically have a percentage of assets under management, typically the management fees of the funds inside of the portfolio, and then the third cost would be any kind of transactional cost. And so I'd be looking for someone obviously with an advisory fee that's competitive. So just that's generally speaking, how we get paid. We always talk about the value proposition. We want to be 3x that fee every single year. Secondly, the internal cost. We don't believe in beating the market. We believe in riding with the market, making tactical asset allocation and diversification moves, but doing that as low cost as possible. So we'll be looking for that. I think the average cost internally is 0.65%. We try to keep ours under 0.25%, almost a third of what the industry average is. And the third thing is, we cover all. This isn't a pitch to us, but I set this up exactly the way I would be looking for someone else to do it if I was hiring an advisor. So I'd be looking for someone to cover all my transactional fees. And that's exactly what we do. If you're with a big broker dealer, you could be paying them 1%. You could be paying another percent to all the pay to play people behind the scenes, all those wholesalers of those mutual funds, and you could be paying, $15 a trade. We've seen in some old broker dealer worlds that can get really expensive really quickly, especially if you're doing, direct indexing. That could be disastrous.
Yeah. Maybe a more philosophical question, but if I was sitting down with an advisor, let's say I sat down with him or her and I said, hey, I want to retire at 50. I want to send 4 kids to Harvard. I want to gift. I want to do X, Y, and Z. And my goals were unrealistic. And if I asked them, hey, am I on track? Am I going to get an answer that is what I need to hear or what I want to hear? And is this advisor going to help me kind of prioritize my goals and help me work through an exercise to understand what's most important for me? Too often I feel like advisors don't do that, and they're left with like a hodgepodge of goals that a client may or may not have that we can maybe help them get to, maybe not. But if we don't help me establish what's most important to me, it's going to be hard for me to get behind a financial plan that is working towards those goals. So I think that's really important in the initial meeting or in the first couple times I'm talking to someone, like, hey, are they going to be real with me if I come with a bunch of goals that I'm either not equipped to work towards, or are they not going to help me prioritize what's most important? That would be almost a red flag for me if they don't give me that direct feedback right away.
Or I'm saving the best for last. I think the most important thing is to look for when choosing a different financial advisor. It's, do you work with other people that are similar situation than me? Because if you do, you're already going to understand, have experience of what typically concerns are for my situation, for my net worth, for my income level, and all of the data and hours you spent with other clients will benefit me directly, because you have all this perspective of how people have messed up, how they've done it well. Do they purchase a vacation house? Do they rent their vacation house? Did they do an irrevocable trust or revocable trust? Did they 100% equities and then they're putting money in cash value life insurance because they're in the high tax bracket? Like, all of those different perspectives, I know they're going to take care of me, versus maybe I'm the lowest client. I'm not going to get any service. Maybe I'm the highest client and they're not telling me that, and they have no idea how to service or know all these tax benefits I could get at this income level. So I think it's really important to ask the advisor, tell me about your book. What are your assets under management? How many clients do you have? What's your philosophy? How many clients per advisor? Generally, you want that about 100 to 125. And who are those? Like, are those physicians? Are those executives? Are those business owners? Are those retirees? Are those tech people? All of those come with different concerns, and making sure that your advisor has the perspective to address your concerns, I think is super important. That will pay for itself. If I go to an advisor as a business owner that works with a lot of business owners, I know right alone they've probably formulated a brain trust in all these meetings, because typically an advisor, you hear all these goals and stresses and problems that need to be solved. And so just that perspective coming to me, that in itself will be worth the price of admission and alone. So what do you guys think about that?
I think you just remind. I think the capacity to take on new clients is extremely important. I think in any business, people want more, more business, and for us, that's working with new people. We've seen environments where people have way too many clients, and it's you can't keep up with it. So I think making sure that the team you're looking to join has the staff to actually handle your situation and give you the attention you should be getting for the fees that you're paying. I think that's good.
I think another important thing is, do you have your clients in the same portfolio? Do you have a model portfolio? Because that's going to show that you're convicted in what you're doing. You're not just telling people whatever they want to hear to get them as a client. You're saying, no, here's our philosophy. So just full disclosure, EWA, we have a custom portfolio that's based upon risk tolerance. So 10% bonds, 90% equities, 20-80, 30-70, 40-60, 50-50, all the way up to 100% equity, zero bonds. And the importance of that is severalfold. One, we're doing the research that applies to every client. With some of our partnerships, we're making the trades and we're doing those in batch. So hypothetically, if like the three of us were clients and we were trading into a large cap position, I go first, you go second, you go third. Well, I benefited the most from that because the market works off of price to earnings ratio in the long term, but short term it's supply and demand. It drives prices. Well, I got in the lowest and you guys just drove the price highest. So are you giving your clients as a whole best execution? Are you trading everything at the same time so everyone gets the best execution? Do you have the technology to even do that? I think those are all super important questions. We've seen, no offense to older 58 or 65-year-old advisor, usually their book is, each portfolio is different, it's random, and their team kind of hates it because it's a service nightmare, versus being able to focus on what matters, the one-on-one relationship, the conversation, making sure the goals are driving and the values are driving the conversation along the way towards the financial plan, not the other way where your money's doing this. We'll skip vacation this year because the market's down. None of that. The goals have to be driving the plan.
Some other good ones I've gotten are, why did you choose your custodian? So we have good rationale behind that. I don't know if you want to go into that, but
tell us why.
So we use Fidelity and Charles Schwab as our primary two. I think most of them are at Fidelity. There's we could keep some at Schwab if people had accounts there just for ease, so you keep your account numbers. But in terms of cybersecurity, they've been at the forefront. So that's kind of leading into another question I wanted to get to. But cybersecurity, they're at the front. They're one of the largest asset managers, so we can plug into their institutional research team. Then third, the protections that they have above the federal limits to protect your money if something were to happen,
Absolutely.
if you got hacked. So there's plenty of reasons why we chose who we chose. So I'd say, one, why'd you choose your custodian? Two, what kind of tech do you use? What's your planning models? Just to hear what they say. I might not know what e-money is or MoneyGuide, like what all of these different techs are as a prospective client, but I'd want to know, like, why did you pick them at least?
Are they secure? How do you share documents? How do you keep my information secure?
Yep. And then third, what protections do you have for cybersecurity? I think you did mention that a little bit ago.
Absolutely.
But
I think that is, moving forward, probably one of the most important considerations you can have, or safeguarding your money.
Mm-hmm. But I think the program's tech, like, I've always been kind of surprised whenever people ask me that, but I think it's a good question because it just, I don't know. I never really think about it, and it makes me think, like, why did we pick those? And then I realized we had some pretty good reasons behind it, and I would personally just want to know what they're using to show me everything.
Thanks for tuning in to our podcast. Hopefully you found this helpful. Really hope this is as beneficial and impactful to as many people across the nation as possible. So hit the follow button. Make sure to rate the podcast, and please share with any friends or family members that would also find this beneficial. Thank you very much.